Hi BookTube, I'm here to recommend some books to you. These are other early 19th century books by female authors that you should read instead of Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, or North and South. So I have two recommendations here for you. The first is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. A lot of the reasons that I think people like Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre and North and South is because they believe that the main characters in those novels are actually strong female characters, but actually I'm here to argue that they're not. I actually think that Wuthering Heights has a strong character in Catherine. Yes, she's flawed, but there's many good aspects to her as well. For example, she readily admits her love for Heathcliff. She knows that it's there, despite the fact that he's not that ideal husband. He's not that rich, upper-class social snob. Like the rest of the love interest in the other books. For example, if you look at Pride and Prejudice, and you look at it analytically, applying literary theory, especially Lacan's theory of the gaze, which very quickly is where power is expressed by one over the other, through how they look at each other. It's a bit more complicated than that, but for the purposes of this video, that's enough. You can actually see the power dynamic between Darcy and Elizabeth is actually very much unbalanced in favor of Darcy. And that Elizabeth doesn't actually have much power in the relationship. And you see that exact same dynamic play out between Jane Eyre and North and South. They'll just kind of fall into these perfect and equal relationships with rich, brooding, and dark men. I put those quotations around there because I really don't think that they're unequal relationships. I really don't find the men that brooding and dark, especially compared to Heathcliff. So this is why this idea that Elizabeth, Jane, and Margaret are strong female characters is kind of ridiculous to me, because if you look at the surface, yes, maybe, but if you actually look deeper into the story, they're not. The storyline is another reason why I think you should read Wuthering Heights. It breaks all the stereotypes of Regency-era romances. I know I was kind of getting sick of reading Jane Eyre, North and South, and Pride and Prejudice, because they all just seem to be the same storyline. So in Wuthering Heights we get passionate love. Not just the genteel kind of love of, oh, do I love you? Yes, I guess so. Oh, let's get married and live happily ever after. No, this is like, I love you. Like, it radiates off them and affects everyone around them. And you actually get to see what happens before, during, and after a marriage, whereas Pride and Prejudice and North and South actually end with, proposals, and Jane Eyre kind of goes into post-marriage, but, everything's happy-dandy after that. We get a female character that is flawed and is not redeemed. She's not, and she's also not obsessed with this perverted idea of martyrdom that Jane, Margaret, and Elizabeth all seem to suffer from. They have to sacrifice for certain things, which, is kind of a ridiculous idea. You get the commentary on society, but it's not just glazed over, as I find a lot of the other books do that kind of have those problems being solved, and mostly being solved off screen. Whereas with Wuthering Heights, you get that nitty-gritty, you get a close look at poverty and drug and alcohol abuse and isolation, and you get those flawed characters who are flawed, who aren't just a part of the plot line there to be flawed and then fixed. And I think that's a really, really good strong point in Wuthering Heights. And yes, the second book I want to recommend is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So while Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, and Elizabeth Gaskell were all regurgitating the same plot, Mary Shelley was being truly innovative, and some even consider Frankenstein the first true science fiction novel. So we know that science fiction is generally a male-dominated field, but, it was started by a female author. And we know that Jane Austen wished to live by her pen, but I think there's a big difference between writing a novel about romance where everything ends up happily ever after, and writing a novel about a whole new concept. You know, Austen, Charlotte Bronte, and Gaskell, you know, they all wrote books about women, but Shelley was able to transcend gender and write a book about a man. And I think what that is a good thing. You know, that may be a bit shocking because you get to see her men as feminized. They break gender roles. The strong influence of Paradise Lost by Milton is very, very evident in Frankenstein. And his monster and himself, you know, Frankenstein and the monster, often get compared to Satan and Adam. But arguably they are Eve and sin. And, you know, because Frankenstein actually reproduced, he created life. So there's that one, you know, that one aspect, or two aspects, I guess. And then again, I'm going to post a link to an article down below about feminized and masculinized language in both Pride and Prejudice and Frankenstein. So if you actually look again at Pride and Prejudice, it actually kind of reinforces the linguistic tendencies of females. So for example, lexical hedges, intensifiers, and politeness are used by females and not by men, or what these days I guess we could call vocal fry or lilting. While Frankenstein actually sees these typically feminine language themes appear in men more often than women. So you can see there's another instance of gender bending. So I think breaking gender roles and breaking into new genres and creating new genres are key reasons why you should read Frankenstein over these other cliched novels. So I think as readers we have to be critical and analytical about books, especially about classics, which seem to be feminist on the surface, but once you really get down to it, they aren't. So if you haven't enjoyed Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre or North and South, don't give up on early 19th century female writers. Try Frankenstein, try Wuthering Heights. They're very great examples of feminist literature, I guess we can call it. So remember to keep on reading.